We're going to take another peek at the final project. You can see that these three article tags are all lined up next to each other. And as I resize the window, they stay that way and automatically get bigger or smaller. How did this happen? Well, let's start off the same way as always, writing article, open and close curly brace, and just a note here, if you have multiple tags with the same name, like we do with the articles here, this will affect all of the articles on the page. The first property we'll use is one that you're familiar with at this point, and it's background. We'll make this have a white background, so RGB 255, 255, 255. Next, just like before, in order to have elements which would normally be on separate lines display inline, we'll need to use the float property. So float left. But we have one problem here. Let's take a look in the browser for a second. We can see that in the section, it's taking up a width of 1100 pixels, which is the size of its containing element, the body. If I refresh the page, the width of these elements are being determined by the amount of content inside of them. The first option you might think of is, okay, so we need to set the width to be 1/3 of 1100 pixels to make them all sit right. The problem with that is that if someone had a smaller window, then the body wouldn't be 1100 pixels. It will be the 95% that we set up as the maximum width. This means that we need to declare the articles to also be as a percentage. So 1/3 of 100% of the containing element would be 33.3%. So let's put that. Now back in our browser, I reload the page, and yes, they're all on one line, but I want some separation between each of these three boxes. So let's look at the picture from before. We can see that outside of the box is the margin, and that it has a margin on all four sides. Since I want to add a margin to all four of the sides, back in Notepad, I'm going to put margin, colon, and let's think about this for a minute. If the size of the margin is put in pixels, then when a person resizes their window, it won't fit anymore into the single line. So therefore, since we're working with percentages, we need to make the margin a percentage. And let's make it 1%. But now we still have a problem. Because before, if all three articles were combined to be 100%, and I now add a 1% margin to all three articles, let's look. A 1% on the left and the right of all three, that's now 106%. So again, they won't fit. So what we need to do is subtract 2% from the width. That's because there's 1% on the left and 1% on the right. This way, we're back at 100%. Let's save and reload in the browser. And I still don't like this, even though it's looking a little bit better. The words are all the way against the edge. So back in Notepad, let's add a padding. And since we're using percentages, let's continue with that. We'll give it a 1% padding to get the text off of the edge. But just like before, if we add 1% to the left and right, we need to subtract 2% from the width, now bringing it down to 29.3%. Save and refresh the browser. And now that's starting to look good. But I see a problem here. Since the height is automatically defined by the amount of content in the article, and this article has less content than the others, we should set a specific height so that they're all the same. Back in Notepad, height, and we'll make it 200 pixels. Before we reload the browser, I want to do one more thing. We have a white background for the articles and black text. I'm not a big fan of plain black text, so let's make it a little gray. So we'll just select the H3, because all of our H3s are inside of articles, and we don't have them anywhere else, so it doesn't need to be more specific. And we'll give it a color of RGB 45, 45, 45. Now let's come and select the P tags inside of the article tags, because we do have P's elsewhere. And let's make those have a color of RGB 75, 75, 75. And also, don't forget that we have a list inside of the second article, so we also need to make a rule for all the LIs. And we'll give them the same color as the P's as 75, 75, 75. Now let's refresh the browser, and now this is really coming together. Let's just finish up the footer in the next section.